Okie dokie. Good evening. Let's begin with some announcements. First of all, there will not be ladies' night tomorrow night. No ladies' meeting tomorrow night. I know there was some question about that Sunday, but y'all will not be meeting tomorrow night. Somebody want to talk about something going on Saturday? Can we have some details, please?
We're having a chili cook-off Saturday at 5 o'clock.
Chili cook-off Saturday at 5 o'clock.
And I'm going to add to it, if you're cooking chili, the key point is for nobody to know whose chili it is. You and your partner or whoever's helping you cook knows whose chili it is. But the point is to keep it secret so you don't know when you vote.
And what time do they need to be here with their chili?
Take 30 minutes to be enough to set up.
Should be.
5 o'clock is when it starts. So how much every time you need to set up, I'll come an hour before and have it unlocked and start having my stuff. So you want to be here 4 or 4:30. But if you're a tester, you can't cheat and come see. You can't come help set up.
So how does this work again? That's a deer in the headlights look. How does one vote?
You will have donations in front of each chili. It'll be a bowl or it'll be something that say donation. You vote on your favorite chili. You can vote every chili, but you vote on your favorite one. The one with the most money at the end.
You vote with money. You vote with money. It's an important detail, yes, sir. That's what I was trying to draw out here. So the way this works is we'll have the chili on the bar, and those who made the chili will be serving, but they won't be serving their own chili. So you won't know who made what unless they tell. And so the first time you go through, you'll have a smaller cup that you can get just a sample. Make sure that those cups are, you listening? Make sure those cups are numbered with, there'll be however many pots you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, and you have the cup numbered with that number. So pot number 1 has cups number 1. So that way when you get a little cup and you go and you taste and you're trying to remember, well, whose was that? Just look at the cup. And you'll also have a little scoring sheet that you can score as you taste them to determine which one you think is best. You may or may not need that, but if you do, you can do that. And then once you've identified the one that you think is best, then you can go to that one and make a donation based on how good you think it was. And you don't have to choose just one. If you want to donate to 2 or 3, you're more than welcome to do so. The more money that you give, the more money the youth fund gets. And this is going towards the youth for going to Bible camp. So, no, cups will be provided. Cups will be provided. Everything will be provided except for the chili. Do you have somebody bringing cheese and sour cream or anything like that? Okay.
If you want to bring a dessert, you're welcome to bring a dessert.
Well, I don't know about y'all, but I mean, chili is going to be my dessert. So, yes, contestants can vote.
And needless to say, if you want to bring extra stuff, like we're going to get jalapenos, cheese, and sour cream. If there's extra stuff that you want to bring that you like with your chili, you're welcome to bring it.
All right, any other questions? That is this Saturday now. So come hungry. By the way, once you've gotten the small cup and tasted and you voted, then you can get a bigger cup of whichever one or ones that you want so that you can eat more chili. The goal here is for nobody to take chili home, right? No, the goal is to fill up the pot so we have a lot of money. The secondary goal is to eat all the chili. All right. Sunday. We're going to be so full of chili that we're not going to want breakfast. But we're going to have breakfast anyway. So, potluck breakfast, 9:30 Sunday morning, combined Sunday school in the fellowship hall. And that's this Sunday. And then we will be partaking of the Lord's Supper at the end of the morning service as well. The WMS zone meeting is going to be March the 3rd. That's on Tuesday night. And that's going to be at the Monticello Church. It starts at 6:30, I believe. And Brother Mark and Miss Joy are going to share about their trip to Africa. And everyone is invited to come and to attend. And by the way, even though this is WMS zone, men, y'all are invited to come and listen in as well. Even though you don't have a part in it, it's good to know what the ladies are doing as well. So you're always welcome to these meetings. And then also the shower for Caleb and Carly, I believe it is. Put these on so I can see what I'm talking about. Yes, Caleb and Carly. That will be Sunday at 2 o'clock at Topeka Baptist. All right, any other announcements? Prayer meeting Monday.
It's still on the table if anybody ever wants to do a devotion for it. Y'all are open.
Yep. Your time is coming. Okay, so prayer meeting Monday at 6 o'clock. All right, do we have any prayer requests? Okay. Channing Allen. Okay. All right. Let's pray for Brandy as she travels tomorrow, yes. We've enjoyed having you here these last couple of weeks. Okay. Seth can't get a break, can he? Let's remember Seth. So pray for the Lambert kids and parents and grandparents. All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer at this time. Brother Dalton, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for all that you do. We are grateful for our church family. We are grateful that we can come here on a Wednesday evening and praise you and fellowship and to dive in your word and just enjoy you, Lord. Father, we do lift up each one that commits in upon the prayer list, Father, for the ones that are sick, Father. We pray that you give them peace and comfort, to heal their body, Lord, right now. We ask that you just touch each one for the ongoing prayers, Lord, for the ones that have lost loved ones, for Miss Belita. Lord, we pray for a full recovery upon her, Lord. And for the many others that's in our community that hurt, Lord, we pray that Forestburg will be able to be a beacon to the community and to this town, Lord. We do lift you up. We praise you. We give you the honor and the glory. We thank you most of all. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, let's walk to class. Yes. All right. I think we talked a little bit about Ruth last time. I want to talk about Ruth a little bit more. I didn't like the lesson we had for tonight, so I threw it out. What do we know about Ruth? Hung out with Naomi, married Boaz, what'd you say? Her husband died? She was a Moabitess? The account of Ruth is really a quite interesting account. The book, where is the book located in the Bible? Old Testament. Narrowing it down. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. And it's interesting, the placement of the book is interesting because it has been referred to as a postscript to the Judges. You understand what I mean by a postscript to the Judges? You know how when you write a letter and then you write a PS, a postscript, and you add a little bit more to the bottom? That's kind of the way that it's been considered by some, because in verse 1 it begins in the time that the judges ruled. So it kind of places the timing of the event, not necessarily the writing of the book, but the timing of the event comes into, and when I say it gives us an idea, it doesn't specifically say this is when it happened. It's just during this time frame, which covers a couple hundred years. But probably more towards the latter part of that. It's also one of two books of the Bible that's named after a woman, which is really quite interesting when you understand the culture of that time. The other book was Esther, and that's another story for another time. We'll do that one day too. The account opens in Judah, specifically in a town called Bethlehem. Bethlehem, that's really important. Anybody know what the word Bethlehem means? House of bread or house of food. We could get off on that and spend all night on that, but we're not gonna do that. But I do want to emphasize this point because it also goes on to say that there's a severe drought and a famine in the land. Now, here they are in the house of bread, and there's a famine. There is no bread. It's interesting the contrast that Scripture uses. Some have suggested that that the name Bethlehem wasn't really the name of the town where they were, but just to place emphasis on the fact that here it is, the house of bread, and there is no bread, to make that emphasis. I disagree with that because later on they come back to Bethlehem, and we will see that from there she's going to marry Boaz when we get to that point. So I think that Bethlehem is the real place here. And it's also a little bit more specific than that. I think I've mentioned this before. There are about 2 or 3 different Bethlehems. And we're also going to see that this is Bethlehem Ephratah, which is important as well, right? 'Cause who else comes from Bethlehem Ephratah? That's where Jesus is born. So we start out with this story that, this account that there's a drought, there's a famine in the land. And then we get some more information. There's a man and his wife. The man's name is Elimelech, and his wife's name is Naomi. Elimelech means my God is king. Naomi means my delight. And so we have these 2 mentioned, and then we also have their children's name. Now, their children's, the names for the children are really quite interesting. It's Mahlon and Chilion. One means sickly, and the other means weak or pining. And one commentator said that especially with during the drought and during this time, that when children were born, they usually were not, or quite often rather, they were not named because the infant mortality rate was so high that they weren't named until after they were born. So after they were born, well, this one's kind of sickly and this one's kind of weak. So maybe so, I don't know. And then again, maybe those names had different meanings at that time as well. We're just going based on the words that are used and and how we understand them. The next place that is mentioned is Moab. And what do we know about Moab? Who was Moab's? I guess he'd be his grandfather. Or maybe it was great-grandfather. I can't remember. No? Lot. His cousin. His nephew. Abraham's nephew, Lot. Remember Lot was in Sodom and Gomorrah. The angels came to them and said, y'all got to get out of town. And they left town, and Lot's wife turned back and looked back and turned into a pillar of salt. And so his 2 daughters are like, they're living up in the mountains all by themselves, and here we are all alone, and so we've got to carry on our father's heritage. And so they get their father drunk, and each one sleeps with their father and bears children. Moab is a result of that incestuous relationship. And so the Moabites are descendants from Lot and from that incestuous relationship. So it really kind of sets an interesting picture when you get a view of this. This is what Ruth is coming out of. This is her heritage. So this is going to come into play in just a minute. So the family left their home in Judah and went to Moab to find food. And when they got there, they settled, or they stayed there for a period of time. Later on, we're going to see that they were there for about 10 years, maybe a little bit more than that. We don't know how long they were there before Elimelech died, but the implication is it wasn't very long. And we don't know exactly how old Mahlon and Chilion were at the time, but they get old enough anyway that they marry 2 Moabite women. And thought I had it on here, but I forgot to, yeah, there it is. Mahlon would marry Ruth, and Chilion would marry Orpah. Now, these two names are also interesting. And I'll talk a little bit more about them in just a minute, but let me go ahead and mention the names. Ruth means friend or friendship, and it's derived from the root word meaning friend, companion. Orpah, Strong's is one of the dictionaries that we use to get meanings of words, gives the meaning gazelle. But another suggestion that I found is that it comes from the root word meaning back of the neck, or to turn one's back. And we'll talk about that later. So following the death of Elimelech, Naomi and her small family stay in Moab for about 10 years, and then her two sons died. Remember? Sickly and weak. Neither one had children. We don't know again how much longer it is, but apparently not too much longer. Naomi, faced with a difficult decision, decided to return to her home in Bethlehem. She heard that the famine had ended and that Bethlehem was again blessed with good crops. So she and her daughters-in-law set out from Moab for Bethlehem. Again, details aren't given specifically as to when, but I would imagine that it was probably that first night when they, as they're journeying, they stop, and Naomi looks at her two daughters-in-law and says, "Look, girls, I can't do anything for y'all. Y'all need to go back home, go to your mother's house, and let them find you another husband." No, we're going to stay with you. No, I insist. She said, even if I were to find a husband and had children, would you wait that long for them to grow up so that you could marry them? No, it's just not worth it. Y'all go back. And so Orpah, what did that name mean again? Turned her back on her mother-in-law and went back home. It's also been suggested that Ruth and Orpah were not their names given to them at birth, that it's names given to them based on their actions in the account. Maybe so. I don't know. Ruth fits, though, because Ruth made a statement that is one that stands apart, does it not? Ruth replied, "Stop urging me to abandon you. Remember, I'm your friend. I'm your friend companion. I'm going to stay by your side. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will become my people. Your God, my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I do not keep my promise. Only death will be able to separate me from you." So, what does this all mean? Wherever you go. Now, she knows that they're headed back towards Bethlehem. So that one's not too difficult to understand. So wherever you go, I'll go. I'm willing to travel with you. Wherever you live, I'm going to live with you. Then she says, your people will be my people. Now, this is a significant statement, because what she is doing is she is denouncing her heritage, her people. I'm not going to be a Moabite anymore, is what she's saying. Your people will be my people. I'm willing to leave everything behind. My people, where I've lived, my home, all of that. Not only your people, but your God. Now, that's really important too, because if you'll remember, in the previous verse, before Ruth makes this statement, Naomi says to Ruth, hey, Orpah is going back to her people and to her God. But Ruth says, that's not my people and that's not my God anymore. I'm giving those up because I believe that your people are going to be my people, and I believe your God is greater than my God. And so I'm going to accept your God as my God. This is what Ruth is saying. Wherever you die, I'll die. I'm devoting myself to you from now and for the rest of our lives, for I will die there and be buried there. And I'm keeping this promise. I'm making this vow before God that nothing but death will separate us. What a beautiful picture we have here of surrender and submission. What can Naomi do for Ruth? Absolutely nothing. She's already said that. And yet Ruth is giving herself completely to Naomi and saying, even though you have nothing to offer me, I am devoted to you. So in other words, it doesn't matter about all of this other. I'm giving myself to you. And the rest of the chapter focuses on their return to Bethlehem. They go back to Bethlehem. Remember, Naomi, when she gets back, says, hey, don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me what? Mara, which means bitter. Bitter. Ugh. Remember the waters of Mara when the children of Israel were in the wilderness? They went to the waters of Mara and they couldn't drink it because it was bitter. And so this is what Naomi's saying. Call me bitter because I've lost everything. I have nothing. Sometimes when we're in a dark spot, it looks like we have nothing. It looks like there's no way out. You know, when you get down in a hole and you look up, what do you see? Just a little bit of sunlight, just a little bit of sky, just a small thing up there. We can't see what else is going on the outside. There's others out there that are getting the ladders ready to drop down in the hole to get us out, but we don't see all that. All we see is this little hole. Man, I'm down in the hole. I have nothing. That's how Naomi feels. And so she said, call me Mara, call me bitter, because I'm empty. God has taken everything away from me, and so I have nothing. Then we get to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is extremely important for a lot of reasons. But one is it shows us the character of Ruth. It also gives us a pretty good understanding of the Levitical law. Let me tell you what I mean by that. First of all, we see Ruth coming in, and instead of her sitting back and just saying, oh, woe is me, we have nothing, what are we going to do, how can we make it? What does she do? She goes to work. Now, she can't get a job at the local plant because she's a nobody. And so she does what the foreigners were allowed to do, and that's to glean the fields. Now, what that means is this. When the harvesters would go through and they would gather the harvest, and this is where the Levitical law comes into play. The Levitical law said, when you go in and you gather your harvest, whatever you drop, leave. Because remember, you were once strangers in another land. And so you leave what you drop for the strangers in your land to take care of them. So as they gathered the harvest, whatever they dropped, they left so that the strangers, Ruth, could come along behind them and gather whatever little bit was there. Wouldn't have been a lot, but it would have been enough that they could have gotten a little something to eat and to kind of carry them over. And so Ruth goes out, and this evidently was very hard work for them to do that. Now, the harvesters, remember, they're gathering the big harvest. But the gleaner is coming in looking, trying to find in this field what was dropped and what was left so that they could gather that. And this is what Ruth is doing. Well, some would say this was coincidence. It wasn't. She happens to go to a field that's owned by a man by the name of Boaz. Didn't happen. God directed her. She just didn't know it yet. And so she's in the field, and Boaz comes out to the field to observe his workers, to see what's going on. And as he's sitting there, he's watching this woman. And evidently, we're not told this in Scripture, but evidently Ruth was a beautiful woman. And some of the implications of things that he says later on, it just implies that she was a beautiful woman. And so he sees her out there and he says, hey, who is that out there? Now, I'm going to say it the way that the guys probably would have said it. Y'all forgive me. He nudged his superintendent and said, hey, who's that good-looking gal out there in the field gathering that harvest? Oh, that's Ruth. That's the girl, the Moabitess that came back with Naomi. She's the one that's out there. Oh, okay. Y'all be good to her. Take care of her. And he even instructed his harvesters to drop some extra sheaths for her. In other words, drop some extra so that she can gather it. And he goes to Ruth and says, you stay with my ladies, with my girls. You stay in my fields and work in my fields, and I'll make sure that you're protected. Because you see, the strangers, foreigners, weren't necessarily well cared for. Even though it was instructed in the Levitical law, they didn't always take good care of them, and things happened. So Ruth goes home, shows Naomi what she gathered that day, and Naomi takes one look at it and says, how in the world did you get all that? I'm paraphrasing, okay? That's not what she really said, but Ruth said, well, I was in the fields of Boaz. Ah, Boaz. Boaz is your kinsman redeemer. I'll talk about this more in a minute. Boaz is your kinsman redeemer. You stay with him. He will watch over you, and he will take good care of you. And so she does that through the barley harvest, through the wheat harvest. And throughout chapter 2, this is what we see happening. And then we come to chapter 3. And in chapter 3, this is where Naomi instructs Ruth and tells her what to do. And it's a little strange because we don't understand the culture. Ruth, I want you to... she got gussied up, okay? That's what it says. She took a bath, put on perfume, put on her good clothes, nice dress. She got gussied up, and she went to where the harvest was over, and at the end of the harvest, they'd have a big party, and the guys would celebrate. And she said, Naomi told Ruth, now make sure that Boaz does not see you. And when he goes and lays down, you see where he goes, and then you go and you uncover his feet and lay down with him. Now that sounds really strange, right? This is what that means. Ruth, I want you to go and propose to Boaz tonight. That's what that meant. By uncovering his feet and laying down and then covering up with the hem of his garment, that was the way that she was proposing to Boaz. In other words, Boaz, I want you to marry me. That's what she was saying. And it's because he was her kinsman redeemer. Takes us back again to the Levitical law. Land was to stay in the family. The family could sell land, and what they were really selling was not the actual land itself, but the rights to raise crops. And the price of the land would be based on how much they could gather, how much they could make off the land until the next year of Jubilee. And at the next year of Jubilee, the land reverted to the original owner, unless the original owner was able to purchase it back. In this case, they would not be able to because they were dead. So the land was supposed to pass to Elimelech's sons. They died. It should have gone to their sons. They didn't have any. But Mahlon has a daughter-in-law that has renounced her people, her land, and chosen to become an Israelite. And so Boaz says, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll do it. However, there is a kinsman that's closer than me. So I'll meet with him and we'll work this out. Chapter 4. Boaz goes to the gate, the city gate. This is where all the business took care of. And he sat down there waiting for his kinsman to come through, and he does. And he stops him and says, hey, brother, come over here. I need to talk to you. Naomi is selling her land. Okay? And so the kinsman redeemer says, oh, yeah, well, sure, yeah, I'll buy it. And Boaz said, well, there's a catch now. Remember, they don't have any boys. So whoever gets the land also has to take Ruth as his wife so that she can have a son to carry on the family bloodline, and then the property will revert to him and back to her family. This is why he says, oh, I can't do that because that would mess up my inheritance. See, that's his response. So I can't do that. And so he says, Boaz, you can do it if you want to. I can't. That won't work for me. And so he takes off his sandal and hands it to Boaz. Boaz takes off his sandal and, okay, here you go. That's how they carried out the transactions of the day. That was, we would shake hands, right? Or today, actually, you sign a contract. Not that even means much anymore. But it's the idea of shaking hands and saying, okay, yeah, we're going to do this. And so Boaz then marries Ruth, redeeming the land, and they have a son carrying on the family line as intended. But there's some twists in this. One twist is that this makes Ruth, let's see, Boaz begat Obed. Obed begat Jesse. Jesse begat David, who would become King David, making Ruth the great-grandmother of King David. And if you go to the New Testament, you find Ruth in the genealogy of Jesus Christ, one of the few women that are listed. Now, let's turn and go back the other direction, because it begins, there's a little bit of genealogy there in chapter 4, and begins with a gentleman by the name of Phares. Who was his mother? His father was Judah, who was actually his grandfather, and Tamar was his mother. Now, who's Tamar? Judah's daughter-in-law originally. Remember, I've told y'all before, forget watching soap operas, just read the Bible. Because what happened was, Judah had 3 sons. The oldest was married to Tamar. He was a wicked man. God took his life. His second son, again, the law said that if your brother dies without having an heir, if your older brother dies without having an heir, then you have to come into his wife and produce an heir. So it's his heir, not yours. Well, I ain't doing that. That's basically what the second brother did. He died. Third brother, basically the same thing. He died. So Judah sends Tamar back to her home and says, go wait, and when I have another son, I'll come get you. But he doesn't. Tamar knows this. Later on, we see Judah going to this area to tend sheep, and Tamar is a little tricky. She sets up a tent as a prostitute, and Judah stops and sleeps with her, and she gets pregnant and has a baby by the name of Phares, who would be the grandfather, great. Anyway, on down the line, we come to Boaz. The significance of that is this. Throughout Scripture, we see men doing wicked things and God redeeming them. Because that Tamar essentially becomes enters into the genealogy of the Messiah, of Christ. Isn't it wonderful how God redeems in spite of what we do? Lawrence Richards writes in the Teacher's Commentary, the book of Ruth reminds us that even in evil times, a godly life is possible. There will always be believers who love and honor God, even in sin-saturated societies. I thought that was a really good statement. The picture of Ruth that I want you to leave with is this. Here is a woman who was selfless. She gave no consideration to herself, was willing to give up everything to go with her mother-in-law and to live in poverty the rest of her life. Because that's all she saw, that's all she knew. And ended up marrying one of the richest men in Bethlehem and entering into the genealogy of Christ and being the great-grandmother of a future king. Wow, talk about redemption. That's the story of Ruth in a nutshell. Questions, comments? No, it was just. It's kind of like shaking hands. They just traded the sandals to show that they were in agreement, that each one was in agreement. Well, I wasn't there, so I can't say definitely, but no, it was just a sign, a symbol that they were in agreement with that. Yeah. There were probably a lot of them with that then, if that were the case, because that was a common thing. So, all right, if all hearts and minds are free, let's stand. And Brother Charles, would you dismiss us in prayer, please?